Are you sometimes surprised by people's behavior? You know, when someone does something you think out of character that directly and negatively impacts you? Would you say you're good at seeing people as they truly are? Or are you constantly surprised and sometimes disappointed by people's behavior towards you? Do you find it emotionally draining trying to keep up with some people's manipulations and resistance in your day to day life? As a human living in a social world, a social arena, if you will, just like the gladiators of ancient Rome, you need to train yourself to be agile and strong to outmaneuver those who would wish you harm. Social intelligence is the ability to see people in their most realistic light, to see people as they truly are and not what they project into the world. To start this process, you need to train yourself to stop projecting your own emotional needs and desires onto others. The trick is to stop focusing on yourself and your own needs and turn your focus on those you wish to better understand. Learn to read their behavior as you interact with them, looking for signs of what motivates them and unwrapping any signs of manipulation behavior. Your goal is not to change others. You need to accept that this is impossible. Your goal is to understand others well enough to be able to interact with them effectively and successfully so you can attain what you want from the relationship and not the other way around. And that this is not to say you need to use people for your own selfish reasons. It's just to be aware that some people will use you to get what they want, and you need to be aware of how these people work. There's a famous quote from the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer on this human condition. He obviously made the quote before the days of equality, but here I'll quote him verbatim. You must allow everyone the right to exist in accordance with the character he has, whatever it turns out to be. And all you should strive to do is make use of this character in such a way as its kind of nature permits, rather than to hope for any alteration in it or to condemn it offhand for what it is. This is the true sense of the maxim, live and let live. To become indignant at people's conduct is as foolish as to be angry with a stone because it rolls into your path. And with many people, the wisest thing to do is to resolve to make use of those whom you cannot alter. You can be an expert in social intelligence, but first you need to go through a process of leaving behind the naive you, the naivety that accompanied you in childhood and through your teenage years and into your 20s and possibly beyond. That belief that everyone is basically good and will do you no harm needs to be replaced by a more realistic view of the world. You need to focus your attention outward instead of inward to improve your observational and empathetic skills. Perhaps you have found yourself labeling others as either basically good or bad, but that's too simplistic. You need to hone those observational skills to be more in harmony with the true intentions of people. Here we're going to look at how you can do that, how you can hone those observational skills so that you prepare yourself in the most effective way possible to ensure that you're not caught off guard again by the dark side of human nature. We're going to look at the top 7 negative human traits, the 7 deadly realities, as Robert Greene in his book Mastery called them. Envy, social intelligence deadly reality number 1. The first negative human trait you need to guard against and be aware of is envy. Aristotle defined envy as the pain at the sight of another's good fortune, stirred by those who have what we ought to have. The phrase green with envy dates back to the ancient Greeks, who believed that jealousy could trigger bile production and turn skin slightly green, a sure sign of sickness. What are the signs of envy in others? They aren't happy for others when they achieve success. Another person's success makes them feel unhappy. They feel the need to diminish someone else's success. They judge others negatively. They are happy when others face setbacks. The potential to be a victim of envy or become susceptible to envy yourself has increased with the rise of social media. It has been documented that social media can trigger envy. The British philosopher Bertrand Russell said that envy was one of the most potent causes of unhappiness. Not only is the envious person rendered unhappy by their envy, Russell argued, but that the person may also wish to inflict misfortune on others to reduce their status. We all suffer from envy to some degree, but it's important to distinguish between benign envy that most people experience and the more dangerous type of real or malicious envy. So, how do you detect this latter sinister type of envy in people? It's not an emotion that is openly on display, often hidden and disguised from public view. Some indicators may be people who praise you too much, people who become overly friendly in the first stages of knowing you, if you detect unusual levels of insecurity in a person. The best way to avoid being the victim of envy is to not put yourself in a position where somebody might target you because of your behavior. Essentially, all of these approaches are common sense, but not common practice. Don't appear to be perfect. Aside from the fact that nobody is, showing weakness in some areas can make you appear as more human. When dealing with people who are insecure, show an interest in their work and ask them for advice. Acknowledge the presence of luck in your journey. Again, whether you admit it or not, luck does play a part. Humor is a powerful weapon against those who would envy you, especially self deprecating humor. And finally, don't draw attention to inadequacies in another's intelligence, perceived or not. This is guaranteed to trigger envy. Until you are so successful that it no longer matters, standing out from the crowd too much can trigger envy. Blending in well with your team and friends and not drawing attention to yourself will reduce the negative and potentially very damaging emotion of envy in others towards you. Conformism, social intelligence, deadly reality number two. Define conform. Comply with the rules, standard or laws. When you're working in an organization, no matter what the size or shape, private or public, groupthink will always be present. To work against that groupthink will inevitably lead you to being ostracized from the group. Perhaps this will not be an overt action, most likely a more subtle and covert nefarious action. This conformism is usually wrapped up in a neat corporate package called culture, and time and again you hear of examples where the prevailing conformism or culture is called out for being destructive and toxic. Most people play along with conformism to get what they want, an end to a means, if you will, and so they stay quiet about what they don't like and display an outward image of conformity. Those less skilled in social intelligence will display their reluctance to conform for all to see. Their options will naturally be limited, and long term, they will have no future in any organisation if they can't learn to curb their tendency, well, to be honest. The whole area of conformity and culture is very interesting. Human resource people are especially good at camouflaging toxic behaviour as examples of leadership and the type of culture we want to develop. They themselves are conforming and in truth are possibly the best at understanding and manipulating social intelligence tactics to further reinforce conformity. If you have a rebellious or naturally eccentric streak, as is often the case in those who seek to question and strive to improve their individual thinking, you have to be especially careful at how you showcase this uniqueness in a corporate setting. In the corporate world, it's best to let your work do the talking and keep your own honest opinions very much to yourself. To quote Robert Greene on this, think of the workplace as a kind of theatre in which you are always wearing a mask. Rigidity, social intelligence, deadly reality number three. Define rigid, unable to bend or to be forced out of shape, not flexible. The status quo is being challenged at an accelerated pace more than ever. The rate of change is accelerating as technology breaks through new barriers across all industries. Electric cars, ride sharing, taxi hailing, sharing your home with tourists. What do incumbents do when they face change? For the most part, they resist. They push back and fight with all their might to stop and delay the inevitable. In all organizations, you're going to encounter people with a fixed and rigid mindset. They will work to maintain the status quo as it's what they know and it benefits them. Again, they will be subtle about how they do this. Procedures will be in place and ways of working will be laid out for you to follow. Questioning these procedures and ways of working in some organizations is ultimately akin to questioning the leadership and authority in the company. The best long term strategy for those who are open minded and adventurous is to learn what you can, absorb all there is in terms of knowledge assimilation, and then get out of there and find a more open minded, flexible working environment. Self obsessiveness, social intelligence, deadly reality number four. To be human is to be focused on the self. There is nothing wrong with being focused on what you desire and what you want to achieve. In a corporate environment, though, if you are too eager to share your own self interests, you run the risk of being accused of being self obsessed. Some people manage to achieve this by being very calculated in the causes they support and will go out of their way to highlight their work and achievements with a holier than thou attitude. If you ask them for help on some project, if they cannot see a direct benefit to them, remember they are self obsessed. They will drag out any collaboration and find multiple reasons not to help. To get this person to help you, you must focus on what you can give them. They are only going to really help you if you can make them look good or give them something they want. It has to be a concrete benefit, not something notional. Laziness, social intelligence, deadly reality number 5. There is no shortcut to achieving your goals. Sure, there are tips and tricks to make the journey easier and more efficient, but there are no shortcuts to true long term repeatable success. You may find that and know that to be true beyond any doubt, but others will not. Others will look to shorten the route to success, and some will use you to achieve their goals. Some of your colleagues will steal your ideas if you are too free with them. Nah, they would never do that, you say. I say you are naive. Remember, this is human nature we're talking about. It's not a question of if it will happen, it's a question of when and how well prepared you are to spot it before it happens. Some people may call this just being astute politically, getting themselves on the right projects, being part of the project team that communicates its work to higher management. Be clear in your own mind, though, what this is and be on the lookout for it. The best defense against this is being cautious and showing good judgment when a colleague asks if you'd like to collaborate on a project or if they invite themselves into your project midway through. In the corporate environment, you need to be wary of those who would collaborate. Research their past work and how they are perceived in the office. Flightiness, social intelligence, deadly reality number 6. We are very influenced by completely automatic things that we have no control over, and we don't know what we're doing. That's a quote from Daniel Kahneman. Expecting people to always be consistent in their actions is to expect people to behave not as people but as robots. Humans are hugely influenced by their emotions. People will say one thing and the next day do another thing. This is the reality. The best way to measure someone's intent over the longer term is to look at their actions. Are their actions consistent from day to day, week to week, month to month? Do they follow through on what they say? If they do, you can be more confident that when they make certain promises, show you attention, and praise your work, that they are being genuine and are more likely to follow through. Being distant from people's emotions and detaching yourselves from their changing intentions is the best strategy to avoid getting sucked into this and being the victim of failed intentions. Passive aggression, social intelligence, deadly reality number 7. A direct confrontation with a work colleague is sometimes the best way to sort out an underlying issue or perceived slight. Think about the number of times you have seen a direct confrontation in an office environment. It's quite a rare occurrence, right? These battles are played out nonetheless, but rarely in plain sight. Those wishing to engage in battle, but without the collateral damage it might cause, revert to more covert means. They become passive aggressive. People who are passive aggressive are on a scale from mild to extreme. Mild would be turning up late for a meeting, handing up a project contribution late, perhaps making negative comments designed to intentionally upset some of their colleagues. This behaviour can extend to the extreme levels where some people with massive insecurities can make your life hell on earth if you let them. The best defense here is avoidance if possible. Recognize these people for what they are by looking at those around them and their past actions. Do not be fooled by their initial behavior towards you, however nice they seem. If you have one of these toxic people on your team or on a project you're working on, by all means call them out on it as a starting point. Make them aware that their behavior is not acceptable. You need to be aware, though, that you will never change their character. Their insecurities will remain, and they will scheme to sabotage at every turn given the opportunity. The best long term approach is to avoid these people if at all possible. These people feed off drama and would love nothing more than to entangle you in their own day to day miserable life. Summary of the 7 deadly realities. We have covered 7 human traits that are less than desirable. They show the human condition in its worst possible light and make it very difficult to live in a positive, productive world. Your goal is to become an expert in social intelligence and be prepared to encounter these human traits and know how to either avoid them or to outmaneuver them. You are 100% guaranteed to come across them at all stages of your life. The goal is to learn how to successfully navigate these human traits.